Napada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kant Radha Kanta Namashtrite Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrinda Vineshwari Rishabhanu Sata Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasad Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharini Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Adesha Tarini Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasad Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Shtakmane Shri Gaura Karna Shakti Bhaktivedanta Tinamine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Vasudeva, Shri Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatubhyascha, Kripasindhubhyevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. Hare Hare. Thank you so much, dear Vaishnavis. Without your mercy, there's definitely nothing that I can say about the Lord. Everything is about Krishna. Ultimately, it's all about Krishna. And so this text it's a wonderful text because there are many of Krishna's pure devotees that have shared with us about about the Lord being about this prayer, my dear Lord, this visible cosmic manifestation. It is a demonstration of your own creative energy. And so they're devotees that when they pray to Krishna, they make note, they make note of this fact that's here in this translation. So it's a very important translation for all of us because what this translation does is it helps us to kind of connect with very great personalities that have prayed to Krishna in the same mood of the residents of Jambudvip and have noted this point about Krishna being visible and about Krishna's own creative energy. And so I wanted to share just a couple of prayers somehow this past week. I've been doing some other things, and somehow they were involving prayers from devotees, different great devotees. And so this point about this visible cosmic manifestation as a demonstration of your own creative energy, this point was made by the wives of Kaliya. And as we know that pastime, Krishna is displaying a leela, a pastime with the Kaliya serpents, and he's demonstrating in that pastime the mood of humility from the wives of Kaliya. He's enacting a pastime, and the wives of Kaliya are praying to him to save their husbands. And so in that prayer that Kaliya, the wives of Kaliya are making, they're expressing with deep humility and in this very prayerful mood. They say obeisance unto you. And of course, Krishna is everything. So they're speaking to the Lord, who know the destination of all things, superior and inferior. So we know Krishna has his superior energy, his inferior energy, who are the presiding regulator of all that be. You are distinct from the universal creation, and yet you are the basis upon which the illusion of material creation evolves, and the witness of this illusion. Indeed, you are the root cause of the entire world. So these are the simple wives of Kaliya, and they're seeing that that Krishna is trying to teach their husband a lesson, and they're fearful of course, because they know who Krishna is, and they just pray. They just pray to the Lord. And to help us to understand how these great devotees, these simple devotees, in their prayer, they understand these philosophical themes. This is quite philosophical, where we hear that the visible cosmic manifestation is the demonstration of Krishna as a creative energy. We learn that also from the prayers of Akura. So Akura is praying to Krishna. Akura is Krishna's uncle, is playing a role, and he's given many different services by Krishna. They have a very close relationship, and Akura is always in that mood, in that humble mood, in that loving, caring mood with Krishna. And so he's saying in one of his prayers, he expresses earth, water, fire, air, ether, and its source, false ego, the Mahatattva, the total material nature and her source, the Supreme Lord's Purusha expansions, the mind, the senses, the sense objects, and the senses presiding deities. All these causes of the cosmic manifestation are born from your transcendental body. He goes on to say the total material nature and these other elements certainly cannot know you as you are, for they are manifested in the realm of dull matter. So what is Akura saying to Krishna? Again, he's in humility. He's expressing philosophically that ultimately everything comes from Krishna. Krishna is the cause of all causes. Krishna tells us this in Bhagavad Gita so many times. He's explaining to Arjuna about him and his existence, his origin, how he's in the material world, how he creates the material world, and why he creates the material world. And so here, Akura is expressing that he's aware of who Krishna is. So what's important in these wonderful verses, especially in all of the Srila Prabhupada's books, but in this fifth canto, is so important, especially in this chapter, the prayers of the prayers of the residents of Jambudvip. What's important is that these in this case, the residents of Jambudvip, they have this mood of knowing who the Lord is. They know. At the same time, they utilize that knowledge to exemplify this mood of humility for the benefit of the conditioned souls in the material world. And these prayers are to help those persons in the material world, conditioned souls, to be able to somehow grasp the mood of surrendering to the Supreme Lord in this mood of humility. That's a criteria for understanding anything about the Lord. And so these prayers from these devotees, they help us to understand that mood. And so when we want to understand anything about Krishna, it's really important to hear from devotees who are speaking about Krishna in ways that they can help us to develop a certain kind of mood. It takes a certain kind of mood to really connect with the Supreme Lord. And Krishna explains to us, he explains to Arjuna, and he explains to us also, because everything he explains to Arjuna is for us, is that in that our determination to understand him is based on the prayers of these great devotees. And in our line of disciplic succession, we have so many of these great devotees that supplicate themselves, to the Lord in order to simply help us to understand the mood of approaching the Supreme Lord. And so here in this text, in the translation, we hear that the countless varieties of forms within this cosmic manifestation are simply a display of your external energy. So in the prayers of Kalia, the wives of Kalia, they're expressing that you are distinct from the universal creation, and yet you are the basis upon which the illusion of material creation evolves. And you are the witness of this illusion. And so Krishna, he has created so many different forms within his manifestation. And in this manifestation, this external energy, this Virat Rupa, is a part of his manifestation. However, here we understand that it's not the real form. This Virat Rupa is not actually Krishna's real form, because everything in the material world is created for a purpose, as we know. And the purpose is basically to help those persons in the conditioned consciousness to become aware of the Lord and to be able to awaken their hearts to this deep, loving relationship with the Lord. And in order to do that, Krishna arranges so many different ways to connect with the conditioned souls. And so one of the ways that he arranged is in his external energy, the Virat Rupa. He arranges for persons that will not accept Krishna, will not accept a personal understanding of Krishna. He arranges this Virat Rupa simply to help people to understand his vastness. And so in a commentary from Srila Prabhupada in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, he expresses, Srila Prabhupada says, the Virat Rupa of the Lord was especially manifested, not for the benefit of Arjuna, although we know that in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, we hear about this manifestation. Yet Prabhupada says it's not for the benefit of Arjuna, meaning it's not only for Arjuna, but for that intelligent class of men who accept anyone and everyone as an incarnation of the Lord, and so mislead the general mass of people. For them, the indication that one should ask the cheap incarnation to exhibit his Virat Rupa and thus be established as an incarnation. So Prabhupada is explaining for us to understand that we are living in this external energy, which in this external energy, there are people who are cheaters. And he wants us to know, okay, if you should come across one of these cheaters even, and they try to express, they express to people that they are incarnation of the Lord, which this happens quite a bit, maybe not so much in America, but in different places, especially in India. There are people that manifest themselves as incarnations of the Lord. And he says, and so here Prabhupada is saying something very simple. If someone says that, then ask them to show their Virat Rupa. Let them show that form. And that form it's a form that only Krishna can show that form. That form is only Krishna can manifest that form. And so therefore it would help us to really be able to express to a person, okay, if you can't show your Virat Rupa form, then I may not accept what you're saying about you being an incarnation of the Lord. So in this sense, Krishna is explaining, Srila Prabhupada is explaining to us that Arjuna is a pure devotee of the Lord. So Krishna didn't have to show his universal form. However, he did that because Bhagavad Gita is, Prabhupada says his books are, his writings are for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right? And so Krishna's words are eternal. And so these words are for the benefit of us and for generations and generations and generations to come. And so this understanding of the Virat Rupa is important in that it simply helps us to understand everything is coming from the Supreme Lord and not to get distracted by all of the different variables that will be there from people in the material world that will try to convince us of something different. I remember in my own personal life, when as a seeker, a searcher, as I actually started being a searcher when I was, I think, 18, 17 or so years old, 17 maybe, and finally met the devotees 10 years later. However, in that brief part of my life when I was really searching, knowing that there was something more than what I was receiving in the material world, I remember having a guru, and my guru at the time, he taught us that we're God. So I'm God, you're God, we're all gods. And for a very long time, I accepted that. Okay, I'm God. Of course, without proper understanding, all that does is build the false ego even stronger. And it makes it even more difficult to surrender to the personal understanding of the Lord. And so for some time, that deception had me wandering in the material world even more than probably I would have had I met a devotee even, earlier than meeting that particular guru. But anyway, that was the path that I had to go on before I could meet a guru, a real devotee of the Lord. And so I remember that you're God, I'm God, we're all God. And so then I saw my guru at the time as God, because that was the teaching. Now, there are different ways that people express that they're God. Prabhupada speaks specifically here about the Mayavadi in his purport, which we'll look at that. However, this Virat Rupa, I read an article by Satyaraj not too long ago, and he was speaking about the Virat Rupa, and he was saying Krishna showed his Virat Rupa 5 different times. And I recalled that I knew at least 2, which was when he showed that form to Mother Yashoda. However, I wasn't so much aware of the other 3 times that Krishna had showed his Virat Rupa for different reasons at different times. So again, to bring that awareness of who the Lord really is, who is Krishna. And as we're saying, Krishna is within everything. And Krishna creates in order to assist all of the different living entities that are in all of the different universes to have some awareness about him in some different way. And so in the last part of this translation, Prabhupada says, Avyapadesha Rupini, that this understanding of the Lord cannot be ascertained by mental speculation. His real form cannot be ascertained by mental speculation. He expresses that except for a devotee in transcendental consciousness, no one can perceive your actual form. Therefore, I offer my obeisance unto you. So here we have Krishna is within everything. He created everything. He is within uh, this external material world, and yet he's not within it. Ishopanishad explains that to us, Sri Ishopanishad. He's in it, but he's not in it. And then he creates a form just to help, just to be compassionate to people that just won't accept who he is. And then he expresses, but my devotee can see me. My pure devotee can see me. And so then again, we go back to the prayers of these great devotees, right? And there are prayers that are even contemporary devotees. When they make these prayers, they acknowledge these words of Krishna. And so in the prayer of Kunti, in the prayers of Srimati Kunti Devi, she says, oh Krishna, those who continuously hear, chant, and repeat your transcendental activities or take pleasure in doing so, certainly they see your lotus feet, which alone can stop the repetition of birth and death. So Kunti is sharing, yeah, those persons that see you, that those persons, they surrender, they see you, they understand that you are their ever well wisher. You are the ones that you are the person, the personality that's caring for everyone. You are the one that can stop the repetition of birth and death. And she expresses the means to have this understanding, which is to continuously hear, chant, and remember the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. The four Kumaras, they also pray. They also said, oh, my dear Lord, our dear Lord, you are not manifested to rascals, even though you are seated within the heart of everyone. But as far as we're concerned, we see you face to face. We see you, although you are unlimited. And so the devotees, the pure devotees, it's not that they're aspiring to see Krishna. Of course, Krishna manifests himself to the devotees because Krishna always wants to please his pure devotees. And so at different times, Krishna himself, he makes himself visible. However, that's not really the desire of the pure devotee. The pure devotee simply wants to serve Krishna. They simply want to be engaged in doing service for the Lord. By doing service for the Lord, that makes them eligible to see Krishna. And so here we have this understanding of that these pure devotees, they can see the Lord face to face. And at the same time, that's not really so much desire in their heart. It's not like they're waking up every morning and saying, Krishna, I just want to see you this morning. Yeah, that's a wonderful, of course, if I could wake up thinking like that every morning, oh, Krishna, I just want to see you this morning. That's great. That's wonderful. However, to be able to wake up in the morning and say, Krishna, how can I serve you this morning? What can I do to please you this morning? That's the mood of the pure devotees of the Lord. They simply want to please Krishna because they are so surrendered. And so when we use that word, sometimes surrendered, it brings up a lot of different I want to say sometimes confusion in the mind. However, when Krishna, when the devotees, the pure devotees talk about surrender, they simply mean become a lover of Krishna, become someone that's fully absorbed in Krishna. Srila Prabhupada tells us, think of Krishna 24 hours a day. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. That is surrender to Krishna. Now, of course, there's things that help us in this surrender. And Queen Kunti tells us, yeah, by hearing and by chanting and by repeating Krishna's transcendental activities, that helps us to always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. And so going back to the four Kumaras, they said the statements we have heard about you from our father, they're talking about now Brahma, they've heard from another pure devotee. So this is the process, right? Is to continuously hear from these great devotees. And they express once they heard from Brahma and they saw Krishna, they were grateful. It says, through the ears have now, because they heard from Brahma through the ears, and now that they've seen him face to face, they have actually realized who Krishna is by Krishna's kind appearance to him. So there's many different pastimes in the scriptures that speak about these great devotees that meet Krishna face to face, and they they get dazzled by who he is. And then they some fully accept that, oh, Krishna, you are the supreme personality. And of course, Prabhupada says that, the aspiration for someone that's practicing bhakti is to be able to develop this mood, this loving mood of wanting to be in the association of Krishna. At the same time, it's not the prominent mood that a devotee want to I just want to be with Krishna. I just need to be with Krishna, right? It's definitely an important sentiment to want to be with Krishna. However, at the same time, to be with Krishna, even in this stage of developing bhakti, means hearing and chanting, calling on the holy names of the Lord, hearing the pastimes of the Lord. That's also being with Krishna. And so Prabhupada, now in the purport, he speaks about the Mayavadis. And he says that Mayavadi philosophers think the universal form of the Lord to be real and his personal form illusory. So there's, again, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we have so many explanations about why Mayavadis may have this conception. Firstly, Prabhupada explains this because they're envious of Krishna. And so this understanding of persons that are in the material world that simply won't accept that Krishna has a personal form, these personalities, they reject the personal form of the Lord because they have other desires. They are still connected in the material energy. And even though their desires may take them to the effulgence of the Lord, to the Brahman, to have Brahman realization about the Lord, still, because we know that in that state of consciousness, in Brahman consciousness, a person can still come back into the material realm, into this realm of birth and death. And so even though they may receive a higher, a greater awareness than just being in the cycle of birth and death, birth and death, birth and death, they may go to Krishna's bodily effulgence. Still, they because they cannot accept that Krishna has this personal form, then they will still enter back into the material realms. And so for the devotee knows, the devotee is understanding the goal of the life of a devotee is to once again be in the embrace of Krishna and Krishna's devotees in the spiritual world. Even though the devotees may not externally hanker for that, internally they have that awareness. They know that. And so we see that devotees that have been in Krishna's embrace have come into this material realms to help us to remember that. And Krishna himself comes and he performs pastimes simply to help us to understand that, yes, these personalities that we label as Mayavadis, or that's labeled as Mayavadis in the scriptures, really they're there to teach us also. They're there to help, people to understand that once somebody comes to that level of realization, Brahman effulgence, if they're very fortunate, they will meet a devotee of the Lord who will help them to understand the real personal aspect of of Krishna, of who Krishna really is. And so in the Prabhupada says, he gives these Bhagavad Gita verses that helps us to understand that how this this entire material creation is resting on Krishna's energy. And then he talks about how it's inconceivable. This inconceivable expansion of the Lord is called Achintya Shakti. And then he makes this very bold point. No one can understand the real form of the Lord without becoming his devotee. And I wanted to make one brief point about that because sometimes as devotees, we become a little bit, how do you say, we become a little self-righteous in that understanding. Only if you're a devotee that we can understand the Lord, right? Only if you're a devotee of the Lord, only if you're a devotee of Krishna. And we know that in so many other scriptures, somehow many people that follow other scriptures may not fully understand what is in their scripture. And so we know that the world is populated with people that are impersonalists. Real Mayavadis is not so easy to find these days, although they're still very visible in India. But in most cases, most people are impersonalists. And there is a bit of a difference with an impersonalist and a Mayavadi. A Mayavadi is absolutely, totally envious of Krishna. A person that's an impersonalist, they may not have proper knowledge, proper awareness, proper understanding. And they may not be totally envious of the personality of Godhead, of the Supreme Lord. So in other scriptures, it's not that there isn't an understanding about the Lord. For example, in the Bible, there is a description of God as having the semblance of a human form. It's stated that God appeared before Abraham in a human form, although the form is not elaborately described. Also in the Quran, it's explained that Allah has eyes, right? I remember, I think I shared the story before. One of my first services was to teach in Africa, the Bhakti philosophy, Bhakti teachings. And we were traveling in Nigeria from one city to another. We were doing traveling Sankirtan, distributing Prabhupada's books. And we had a driver that would drive us. And he was a Muslim. His name was Chikiro. And so sometimes it would take hours to get to the next city. And so he was very sincere Muslim person. And he would do salat 5 times a day. He would pray. And each time we would have to stop the van and he put out his mat, no matter where we were, turn to the east, and he would pray. And sometimes in the mornings we would be chanting, and we are chanting and he's praying. And he's praying with an understanding that God exists. He knows that there is a God, right? He knows that. He may not have proper realization about it. But here we see in the Quran, it says Allah has Allah's face. There's speaking, one of the sutras is speaking about Allah's face. And of course, in the Bhagavad Gita, we know everywhere Krishna are his hands, his legs, his eyes, his head, and everything is there. Krishna, the super soul is everywhere, in everyone, in everything, every living entity. And so it's not that it's in certain scripture, in some of these scriptures, personal awareness of the Lord is not there. It's just that the way society, has colonized the mentality of people in the material world, it's done that so expertly in such a way that most people don't even understand their own scriptures, right? Which is why it's so important to develop this mood of humility from hearing from these pure devotees of the Lord, and especially hearing the prayers. Because when you hear the prayers in any of these scriptures, a person cannot miss that God is personal. You just can't miss it. And so going back to Prabhupada's statement, therefore no one can understand the real form of the Lord without becoming his devotee. This means becoming a real devotee, becoming a sincere, I think yesterday, Dasya Prema, was giving, or maybe it was the day before. And there was some emphasis on the sincerity of a person in practicing whatever path they may be on. So sincerity is required to understand the Lord. And people may have certain desires that may be a distraction from really getting to know the Lord. Ultimately, Krishna makes himself available wherever someone may be. And it's only a matter of time before everyone realize that they are servants of God, servants of the Lord, and that they are to surrender to serving the Lord. And so I wanted to just close this with a prayer from a very contemporary devotee. And she prays in the mood of belonging, because ultimately we all are looking to belong, right? Somewhere or another. And we all belong to Krishna. Oftentimes, most people in the material world are not aware of that. They're not aware that Krishna is lovingly there for all of us. Krishna is in our hearts. Krishna is lovingly waiting for us to turn to him. Yet we see that the way of the world is to turn people away from the Lord. And so this devotee, she prays like this: I have searched my entire life for somewhere to belong, for someone to belong to. I belong to the sound of the sea, the light of the sun, and the heat of fire. I belong to the passion of creation and the wilderness of annihilation. I belong to the fragrance of the earth and the feel of the summer breeze. I belong to romance, to adventure, to victory and strength. Beyond this time, beyond this place, beyond my own heart, I belong to it all because I belong to you. And this is a prayer that she wrote to Krishna. This is a Achyuta Gopi, young Kirtaniya, singing her heart, praying to the Lord, understanding she belonged to Krishna. So ultimately, all of these verses are to help us to remember who we belong to and to understand that person that we do belong to learn more about that person. So even though philosophy is there, it's important to put it in perspective for us to really remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. Okay, dear devotees, that's all I have for this morning. And if you have some additions, subtractions, realizations, reflections, please share. Okay, Yashadev Prabhu is sharing. Prabhupada says at the end of the purport that therefore no one can understand the real form of the Lord without becoming his devotee. My question, if you please, how can the adherents of other religious tradition understand about the personality of Godhead? Is it possible that they understand the Lord even better than us? Uh, I love you, Yashadev. Your mind is always thinking like mine, or my mind is always thinking like yours in some ways. A little bit critical thinker. Sometimes people get worried about that. They challenge that. Why you want to be a critical thinker? It sounds like you're being offensive. No, Krishna wants us to think critically. This is why he does things like do the universal form so that we can, the Virat Rupa, so we can really be critical. So I wouldn't say that they understand better than us. I wouldn't say that because most of what is in the scriptures, people don't really explore it. And a lot of times, what's in their scriptures is not in any way as deep as what's in the Vedas, in terms of understanding Ras, Krishna and having a relationship with Krishna. There is some understanding in the Torah from what I've read and having friends that are Jewish. And because there is an understanding of the bride of God. However, as far as I understand, my limited understanding, the the details that's given about the Supreme Personality of Godhead can only be found in the Vedas. Now, that's a very sectarian sounding statement. However, that's according to my realization. Because I think if having been a seeker in my own life and having, you know, read the Quran, read the Bible, and even read some of the Torah, having gone to Israel and been in Israel, having lived in a kibbutz, I think I would have kind of followed something like that if I wasn't getting deeper awareness about the Lord. Now, I do think practitioners on their path may may have some emotional attachment to God without knowing so much of the details about the Lord. And sometimes that could appear more than what a devotee might have sometimes externally. However, I think that's why I kind of like the prayers of the pure devotees, because their mood is just so emotionally expressive of the love for the Lord. When you read the prayers of Bhaktivinoda Thakur or read the prayers of Bhaktisiddhanta, so much expression about, so much emotional expression about loving the Lord and not being qualified to love the Lord. So I wouldn't say that. Um, at the same time, I don't think being so dismissive of other people and being self-righteous is also, I don't see that as a way of really being compassionate and caring for other people. I think we as devotees, we're given special mercy to be very caring, very compassionate for those persons, like you. That's what you do, right? Your compassion, your love for these souls helps you to reach out to them, regardless of what they might be knowing. Of course, where you are, I'm sure people aren't even many of them may not think even deeply about the scriptures because they're pursuing, their material goals right now. But there you are, there you are for them. Because material goals can be a form of like religion also. Someone can just live for that. So there you are. You're helping them to understand that that's a distraction. So I don't know if that helps, Yashadev Prabhu. I haven't yet. My Guru Maharaj always used to say, if I find something that teaches me more or opens my heart more than bhakti yoga, tell me about it. I want that. So I don't know. I've been practicing for over 40 years. I haven't found that. Hope that's helpful.
Hare Krishna.
Tarka Prabhu, Haribo.
Mother Brajalila, thank you for a nice class. Lots of nice meditation on Krishna and his devotees. Hey, one thing you mentioned got my mind racing. We're talking about the Virat Rupa and five different instances of Krishna displaying his Virat Rupa, and I was trying to think of what they were. And so there's Arjuna, of course, Mother Yashoda, Akrura, and there is mention, briefly mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Lord displayed his Virat Rupa to Advaita Acharya, was also witnessed by Lord Nityananda. Um, there's more elaboration on that in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. Um, it describes there that both Advaita Acharya and Lord Nityananda saw this form, and that when they saw it, they danced in ecstasy like jubilant peacocks.
Yeah.
Um, the only other instance I can think of, um, I remember Srila Prabhupada mentioning both that Lord Brahma meditated on the Virat Rupa and also that the Virat Rupa was displayed to him. But I'm curious to know which instances you are aware of. What are the five that if you remember? I'd be curious to hear that.
Um, the this one that it was a while I read that article and then I tried to find that article again. Um, because I thought that was important for me to really know, like, oh well, wow, Krishna, I could only remember three ways that Krishna showed his Virat Rupa. But there is this one that is in the Mahabharata, that just after the war of Kurukshetra, Krishna went to Dwarka, and on the way he met an old friend. It was a sage named Utanka, and they stopped to talk, and Krishna, told him about the details of the war. And what Satyaraj wrote here, which I maybe can just read this, Utanka found it disconcerting that Krishna did not stop the proceedings, since he certainly had the power to do so. As that conversation grew more heated, Utanka threatened to curse the Lord with his yogic powers. But Krishna told him that such curse would be ineffectual, since as God, he was the source of all mystic powers. Utanka doubted that Krishna was powerful enough to avert the curse, and so he challenged him. Is it so? Are you the universal Lord himself? If so, please prove it to me. Krishna then manifested his Virat Rupa. Utanka was particularly blessed, and this is in the Mahabharata, tells us that he saw the same vision that Krishna had previously shown to Arjuna. Awestruck, Utanka glorified Krishna. Utanka glorified Krishna's many superlative attributes, and as in the instance of Yashoda and Arjuna, beseech him to withdraw his overwhelming manifestation. Krishna did so and then offered Utanka a boon. He assured him that he would have water whenever he needed it and would never go thirsty. So that is in the Ashwamedha Parva section of the 14th book of the Mahabharata. That's Satyaraj. Satyaraj is so brilliant, I mean, I, I can't believe that sometimes I think of some of the devotees that I had the opportunity to be in their association and didn't really take advantage of who they were, in relationship to what the gifts that they've been given by Krishna. So he's an amazing writer. And I just saw him as Satyaraj. He's just like, oh, this is Satyaraj. you know, it's just amazing. So yeah, this is what he shared.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I had not heard about that particular instance. from Mahabharata. So I learned something from that. Hey, thinking a lot about this um, verse mentions that makes mention of the universal form, but in particular that um, talks about only the devotees can see Krishna's real form, that the Virat Rupa is not his real form. And um, so this is Krishna speaks about this himself in a few places, starting with Bhagavad Gita in the seventh chapter. He explains that his real form is covered. He says, "Naham prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samavritaha moto yam nabijanati loko mam ajam avyayam," that I am never manifested the foolish and unintelligent. For them I am covered by my internal potency, and therefore they do not know that I am unborn and inexhaustible. Um, Later in Bhagavad Gita, he explains that he is particularly accessible to the devotees. You mentioned Queen Kunti. Queen Kunti in Srimad Bhagavatam in the first canto, eighth chapter, there is a statement from Queen Kunti. She says, "Being beyond the range of limited sense perception, you are the eternally irreproachable factor covered by the curtain of diluting energy. You are invisible to the foolish observer, exactly as an actor dressed as a player is not recognized." So this is another instance of Krishna being described as being hidden to those who um, do not have that special quality of having their eyes tinged with the salve of love, which is um, what is described by Lord Brahma in the Brahma Samhita, in the 38th verse of the fifth chapter. I think the fifth chapter is the only chapter that we have of Brahma Samhita. The rest was lost over time, but so in the 38th text, Lord Brahma says, Premanjana churari bhakti balochanena santa sadaiva hridayeshu vilokayanti yam shama sundaram achintya gunasvarupam govindam haripurusham tamaham bhajami. Says, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shama Sundar, Krishna himself with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gives us a wonderful commentary on this text. There's lots to be gleaned from that, but we are already over 8 o'clock, so I'll move on to something else from the Ishopanishad, the 15th mantra of the Ishopanishad. Hiranmayena patrena satyasya pihitam mukam tatvam pushan apavrinu satya dharmaya jirishkaye. My Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee. So here, another example of a devotee praying to see Krishna's real form. I mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna discusses this, and in particular, the 18th chapter, text 55. Everybody knows Bhakya Mama Vijanati Yavanyas Jasmi Tatpata Tato Mam Tatpato Gyatva Vishate Taranantaram. he says that one can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. And Srila Prabhupada gives us a wonderful purport to that text. It talks a little bit about how Krishna cannot be understood by mental speculation, nor by the non-devotees. And that's another whole topic. But Krishna talks about two different classes of individuals who try to understand him, and he includes those who try to understand through philosophical speculation. And he is referring to the Sankhya system of yoga, which Srila Prabhupada explains is also bhakti. But of the two, devotional service is direct and much easier. Also from Bhagavad Gita, in the 11th chapter, Krishna says, Bhakta Tavanyaya Shakya Aham Evam Vidorjuna Gyatum Drashtum Chittatvena Praveshtum Cha Parantapa. My dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. And another nice purport to that verse. Well, we've gone 10 minutes over time, so I had lots more, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you again for your nice class. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Taka Prabhu. Your additions to whatever is shared by, those of us that, at least for myself, that is really begging and praying to get some realization about the Lord. Your additions are always very nourishing. And my prayer is that one day you just decide that you're going to give Srimad Bhagavatam class, be on the schedule. That would be so wonderful.
I would love to give Srimad Bhagavatam class, but I am so pressed for time. I don't really have time to apply myself to preparation. I've got various projects from Dhruva and His Holiness Devamrita Swami that they're hoping that I can complete for them, and it's funding of various projects, and to do that, I'm actually working 16 hours a day, starting before 4 a.m. and I don't finish until 8 p.m. And it's very, very intensive work, grueling and intensive work. Um, I can't divert my attention for a moment without bad things happening. Sometimes terrible things happen, but anyway, that's my excuse. I'm just really, really busy trying to do some important things, and but I do have actually plans to do some classes, and I'd like to do some seminars on some particular subjects, but I just having a hard time finding the time to do that. All right,
Well, we
Hare Krishna.
appreciate so much the few minutes that you give input. Thank you so very much. And I've been doing a lot of writing recently on yeah. Anyway, thank you so much. I'm very, very appreciative of you sharing. Always highlights so much of what I say. Thank you so much. Really grateful. Dear devotees, thank you. It's 8:13 on the dot, and I think the deities are open. Damodar is waiting to see your wonderful faces. Okay. Is that happening to, or is it finished? The Damodar.
It's happening, but we are not privy to the darshan because we don't have anyone in the Zoom who's in the temple room with a camera
The camera.
on the deities. So
I see. Okay. Well, we can all meditate on the wonderful form of the Lord that's going to come in pictures very soon. And we can always, meditate now and see how they're beautifully dressed in the pictures that's sent to us by a wonderful devotee that sends them out every day. Hari Hari, Hare Krishna Prabhus. Hari Bol.